All right, thanks you guys for coming on to class number 9 and for sharing on Facebook and for all of your commitment to sticking through till 9 classes. And we still have up to 15. So it's a real, there's so much depth. That's why I called it deep dive. There's really just so much to learn and absorb. When I learned about miasms, I learned it for the first time over a weekend with Paul Hersky and Amy Rothenberg, and they taught Friday night, all day Saturday, and no, all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. So it was like 3 days of just miasms, and that's like a lot of hours. So even though we have 3 classes, it's still not actually a lot. There's so much that could be learned. And when I took that miasms class from Paul, it really like sunk in. It took me, it revolutionized the way that I saw the world. And that's what I hope for you guys, is that when I'm teaching this information to you, it's creating a lens for you to kind of step back from the world and not be such a participant in everything, but literally be able to kind of step back and see things from this, bird's eye view, and understand the patterns that underlie behaviors, and be able to unlock those patterns for yourself and maybe for others. So, yeah, sorry, Christy, we just decided in class to move the time of class from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock instead of 4:30 to 6:30 Pacific time, just so that the East Coasters have a little bit more time to go to bed. So with miasms, it's like a lot of you probably already know about it. What I am hoping to teach in these next 3 classes is both the traditional stream of thought that comes with miasms and how they were developed, and the contemporary stream of thought. So this class today is going to be more about the traditional 3 miasms and what that's about. And then next week I'll be teaching on the contemporary forms of miasms, as has been developed mostly by Sankaran, but has been embraced by contemporary homeopaths like Schulten. So I'm going to be teaching you classical and the more in-depth way of looking at it. I'm also want to teach, and I want you to understand that miasms are a slippery, debatable, confusing subject. It's both like, you can choose a remedy and say that it's this miasm or this group, or it's also a very like understandable and systematic, and you could be rigid about it. And so it can kind of go both ways. And so I want to share that. Like, I want you to see it as, wow, this is so useful. It's such a good way to group remedies, but I also want you to see that it's also very malleable. And that's how homeopathy is. Homeopathy is a paradox. It's just like sometimes things are, confusing. And then lastly, and I haven't put this into the notes, I want you to see how much the idea of miasms really is about the fact that we are literally always changing and experimenting with our own human body, our own DNA, and passing that on. So we're creating modern miasms all the time. Like we've talked about strep being its own miasm. And I believe pharmaceuticals is creating this miasm. So we experiment with ourselves and we pass that down, and the next generation has that piece passed to them. And I was just thinking about this just with, it's not even, it's kind of like even a cultural thing. I've been thinking about that with the ease at which kids play video games and want to sit in front of like a little light box these days. It's been 2 generations of people watching television. And now, like, we have this technology miasm where it's much easier for one of our children to sit in front of a video game for 3 hours than it is for them to sit with some goats, right? On a farm for 3 hours. Like, my kid could like maybe pet a goat for like 15 minutes, but then she wants to go in front of maybe like a screen, and she could do that for 3 hours. That's probably true for most of our kids. I don't think that was true for like millennia of humans. And so there's literally, we're passing things down and we're changing things. And there are groups of humans in the world that are not this way. There are groups of humans who choose to remain in their own small realm of existence that is unchanging. And these are, you know, tribal people in Africa, Mennonites, Amish people, Hasidic Jews, you know, and I don't know, who knows, you know, at some point, those may be the people who really carry the genetics in a way that's more pure, or maybe their unchangingness is a real problem and they, you know, their genetics, you know, cave in on itself, and it's the change that is our evolution, that is our beauty. So, so I want to kind of express this idea of like, we are always kind of creating and evolving in these new ways. And lastly, some of you are homeopaths who totally get the idea of miasms and have learned it. And some of you don't have much exposure at all. I want to be able to be there for both of you. And so I'm also going to be teaching miasms as they're applied to special needs kids, and the way that I view them. And so hopefully that will help for the people who already have exposure to miasms. So that said, I'm going to put up the notes. Okay. Any questions? Are we all good? The chat. Alrighty, you guys. So what I've been talking about miasms, and I have first up, what is a miasm? What do you guys feel is a miasm? What comes to mind for you guys that defines a miasm, if you're not just looking straight at the notes? Or how many of you have like absolutely no idea what a miasm is? Please type. Yeah. Yeah. So some of you are total neophytes. Great. A disease state passed on for your ancestors, inherited patterns, predisposition to disease, an inherited taint or weakness susceptibility. Diseases passed down through generations, genetic predisposition, your predisposition to this or that, underlying theme of your health being passed down from your family. That's right, you know, and like, there's so many words for that. Like, you know, I think when Hahnemann came up with miasms, there was no word for genetic predisposition. In fact, when Hahnemann came up with the idea of miasms, they didn't even know about germs being passed from one generation to the next, right? And so it was controversial for him at the time to even, he was like, there is something that gets passed down from family to family. I sense it. And he tied, you know, miasm is this kind of cloud or this stain or this pollution that kind of goes and moves through the generations. So you have a generation of, you know, alcoholics, it gets kind of passed on, or, you know, a generation of, I don't know, immense like exposure to heavy metals will get passed on. So right, it's the idea of kind of patterns that get passed down in the family. And make it a little bit harder for us to heal, because it can be very deep. In some ways, you know, we could even call it karma, you know, it's what we're kind of inheriting, maybe, I don't know. So great, you guys all get the idea of miasm. What do you guys know the difference between maybe a miasm, like a remedy that's a miasmatic remedy versus a nosode? So I'm teaching the miasms within the nosode series, right? And that's partly because nosodes are used for peeling away miasms, but not all remedies used to peel away miasms are from disease material, like thuya, which is the conifer, is well known as a psychotic miasm remedy. How do you look at miasms with adoptive families? Do you look at the birth family or the adoptive family or both? Yeah, in my experience with adopted kids is that most adoptive kids that come to me, they're coming to me because there's major problems. I'm not seeing healthy adopted kids. I'm seeing very unhealthy adopted kids, and they're partially unhealthy because of what their actual ancestral genetic picture that they've inherited, not the adoptive family picture. I'm sure some of that merges, and it maybe merges more with healthier kids. But usually it's nature. I actually, from a homeopathic point of view, you can really, really bank on the nature other than just the nurture. It's like what we inherit, you start to feel it when you start to kind of muscle test and energetically feel the degree to which we are downstream effects of the patterns of our parents is so deep. Like you can have trauma in your life, you're having issues with your partner. It doesn't take much for you to just kind of step back and say, what is this issue? And does this relate to the exact type of energy that came up in my parents, in my grandparents' parents? There is so much. We are literally streams of energy flowing down from generation to generation. So, I think nurture is absolutely fundamental and plays into how we express ourselves. But we inherit an incredible amount. And then when we get pregnant and bear children, we take on all the genetic inheritance of our husband or our partner's family. And that genetic energy plays itself out in your whole life. Like, you never lose the genetics of your kid's father. It's a part of your bloodstream. So not only are you dealing with your parents, but you're dealing with your husband or your kids' parents' energy moving through you. And if you're a healer, you're really going to feel it, and you're going to, you can process it, some of it, or you can kind of not be like, I don't want to deal with you. But do you guys sense that and know that and have felt that? And I think that's why a lot of women, during pregnancy and after pregnancy, all these things develop. I mean, it's like, one, it's a stress on the body, but two, different streams of information are coming through your system. So yeah, make peace with your ex, make peace with your husband's family, make peace with those people, because they are you, they're a part of you. And that's the challenge of being a woman. And it's also why we are intuitive. Why are we intuitive? Why do we care about healing? Because in our bodies, we feel it and we need to work through it. And otherwise it gets even worse. I really believe that homeopathy is one of the few modalities that helps us actually unwind the inheritance piece. Supplements out there never talk about healing your ancestry, right? Homeopathy, holy cow. Maybe that and the family constellations work, and hypnosis work, tons of therapy work, are things, spiritual work, forgiveness work. Those are the types of therapies that help us work through some of that. But homeopathy is just amazing for it. All right, so Hahnemann developed miasms theory because he saw that there were things that he couldn't shift in people. Things would kind of come back. And so he understood the idea of suppressions kind of coming back to the surface. But even at the time that he developed the idea, it was controversial and not clear cut. But it was the first time in homeopathy, because when the remedies started being developed, they were kind of the miasms grouping came before the grouping of these are plant remedies and this makes them plants, and these are, it was all kind of mixed together and just treated alphabetically. So the kingdom theory that I'm also teaching you, where plants, animals, minerals, and nosodes, that's actually contemporary. So the miasms theory is the first time in homeopathy where things were really, remedies themselves were grouped together based on larger patterns. Some homeopaths really developed this. Kent, who I think was an American homeopath, and he really developed the idea of like this strong spiritual component to homeopathy, where we have this ultimate like spiritual identity that if we access it and heal it, everything else will fall into place. And he kind of said that, you know, Sora, the one of the first miasm, equates to original sin, you know, and the idea of like, and I'll get into it a little bit further, but that it's the first disease, and deviancy from, you know, what our true nature is supposed to be is disease. Sin, I don't like the word because it's too religious, but the root of the word sin is missing the mark, you know, missing where we're supposed to be going. And I kind of think that's interesting because with intuitive homeopathy, what I'm striving for you guys is to be on the mark. It's like you're tapping into the love in your heart, you're tapping into your intuitive self, and when you give that remedy, you're on the mark each time because it feels right, it feels true, it feels good, it feels in alignment. And when you're in alignment, you're on the mark and you're able to kind of peel back the layers. So hopefully that wasn't too religious for you guys. Yeah, you know, there's talk in homeopathy about, you know, what is health? Health, one of the things I love about homeopathy is the definition of health as freedom. And when we remove the miasms, we create more freedom for our self-expression. So I found this really cool quote where it's like, you know, when we are healthy, we have freedom from ourselves, like our egoic self, freedom from inner conflict, and freedom from the chains of our miasms, all of the patterns that we've inherited, if that makes any sense. So a really good book to read about contemporary miasms is The Soul of Homeopathy. Sankaran, and I'll get into this in the second class, he really develops miasms further. But his view of it is very interesting. And he says that disease is a false perception of reality. Disease is ultimately a delusion. And so when we peel back these miasms, or we heal these miasms, we're healing delusions. We're healing false perceptions, that a perception that may have developed in a situation. So for example, and this is true for like how people talk about trauma and how you have the trauma happening, and then the trauma's over, but the trauma replays itself through the limbic brain and you can't get out of that loop, right? So so this trauma happens to an ancestor, and say it's the trauma of like World War II, and you're this aerial bomber, and you're just like constantly like in acute mode and like intense. Actually, I have a friend whose father was, you know, in 3 wars, grandfather was in 3 wars and was the guy who dropped the bombs. And it created such an intensity that got passed on, that his grandson was like literally like the most like intense person I had ever met. And everything was this like intense PTSD thing for him. You know, they freaked him out. It just gets passed down, right? That intensity of that situation replays itself until at some point in those generations, somebody releases the delusion, releases that, hey, I'm no longer living this acute situation. Why am I reacting like this? This is true for special needs kids who are in, you know, having seizures. You know, at some point there was, you know, a lot of fight or flight, you know, in the ancestry. It's not actually happening when you're living in the suburbs, but the kid is experiencing that. on some level. And we may think that fight or flight was from the MMR vaccine, but how much did the MMR vaccine potentiate the fight or flight potentiality that happened because of acute trauma that happened 2 generations ago? And that's how it is in homeopathy. It's like there's those little things that kind of push us off the cliff, like, you know, bad foods and vaccines or pharmaceuticals or whatever it is, but there's all this potentiation from previous generations. So, makes sense. All right. Okay. So, you know, well, I'll get into the Songkran part. So there's 3 main miasms proposed by Hahnemann. They were Sora, psychosis, and syphilis. Those are the 3 I'm going to talk about today. And the other ones, which a lot of you know about, some of the most important ones, tuberculinum, carcinosin, we'll talk about in the next couple classes, but those are just as fundamental. So I made this, what's the name of the book? Soul of Homeopathy. Oops. Yeah, it's all good. All right. So yeah, I made this little graph chart at some point. It was kind of based on Paul Herskew's teaching of homeopathy. And he was like, when he was teaching the miasms, he's like, imagine you're like on a certain mountain, and that mountain has, you know, a little bit of some goats here and like a certain type of like trees, and it has like a whole set of ecology on it that's unique to that mountain. That's how it is when there's a miasm. The miasm's the mountain, and the remedies associated with it are all of the things living on that mountain, you know, and that mountain has a certain quality to it, a certain energy to it. And we move to different mountains as we heal. We move on this journey. Our journey ultimately, if we're moving towards health, is moving towards a place of self-preservation, you know, a place of like less self-destruction and more self-preservation, less like I want to die and more like I want to live. So this is, you know, this is like a journey, like this is, say, like my journey, you know, which is kind of similar to this, which is, if I think about, you know, my late teens, early 20s, I was super tubercular. I was traveling all over the place. I was really phosphorusy, really kind of out there and experimental, and maybe a little ADHD and a little too open. And that was the tubercular miasm, and that living in that state got me probably all the illnesses that I had to kind of recover from over the next following 10 years, right? So tubercular miasm was where I started off. And when I started with homeopathy, one of my first remedies was phosphorus, which is a tubercular remedy. And phosphorus helped me with my lungs. It helped me with boundaries. It helped me with the parts of my body that were really deteriorating. Tubercular miasm we'll talk about, but it's essentially this kind of speedy going, life is short, live it up kind of energy. And then as I healed, I became more of like psychotic miasm. And psychotic miasm is more like fake it till you make it. Like if you have a problem, you sweep it under the rug, and I will share more about that. But it's these remedies like Thuya and Meteorinum, and this was my period of maybe like, you know, really starting out in homeopathy, not knowing as much as I know now, but really in a strong, like, I'm going to do it. I know what I'm doing. And if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not going to tell anybody. And then slowly as I healed, like at this point in my life, you know, I'm no longer psychotically living in like a city, you know, being out there and energized by people and stimulation. I'm living kind of a quiet life in a small town, you know, and raising my kid and trying to live simply, and in a much more kind of sulfury, basic mineral state, caring more about just, staying warm in the winter and making sure we have enough wood to light our fire to keep our house warm, things like that. And so that has been me. And ultimately, for a lot of families and a lot of kids, we may bump around to different miasms, but we want to move towards kind of a healthier place. So miasms are this tool, a categorizational tool for grouping remedies. It helps us, some miasms are more destructive and some of them are more self-preserving, and ideally we're moving towards the more self-preserving miasms. And that's it. Different homeopaths will categorize these remedies differently too, and so that's where the confusion lies. We all good? I'm gonna keep plugging forward unless you guys say anything. And then we'll maybe at the end of class, if we have time, kind of see if any of you guys really kind of feel like any of these miasms fit for you guys. So the first miasm. So the first miasm is Sora, equated with when man left the Garden of Eden. So I want you guys just to picture that, just to imagine that. I want you to imagine being in a place where you can be naked and you don't need clothes, and there's fruit and animals and food everywhere. You feel infinite love, infinite abundance. There's no worries, there's no care. You're taken care of. You don't have to question things. The right decisions just flow to you. It's all good. And then all of a sudden, you are booted out of this beautiful environment for one reason or another, and all of a sudden you feel cold, and the food isn't available to you, and it's like a desert, and you're all of a sudden there's like little things that bite your skin, and you're feeling all of a sudden unsure. And so it's that juncture, that feeling that we all carry within us. We are all Soric at heart. This is a miasm that fits all of us. And it's the fundamental state of, I'm in a state of constant deficiency. I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough food. And I always have to make up for the loss. And so we are all built this way, right? There's always energy coming in and energy going out of us. And we can only do as much based on the energy coming into us. And we recognize this. We recognize that we have to maintain some sort of homeostasis. The core sense of Sora is the sense of every farmer, every like basic person out there living on the planet, unless you're still living in the Garden of Eden, maybe in Shangri-La somewhere out there, which is, I'm not enough, like I gotta get ahead. And this is the foundation for, hard work, why we need to just like get stuff done. So chief remedies, you could argue some of these: calc, carbs, sulfur, lycopodium. In general, I see the Soric remedies often as like a lot of the basic mineral remedies, like in the periodic table of elements, the remedies at the top, the really well-known mineral remedies that are polycrest, because those are our basic structure. They really like fit our basic structure. And if we kind of just come to like clearing enough layers and get to the point where we're just dealing with fundamental issues, dealing with our structure, it's a good place. So people generally, if you're really Soric, you're always feeling a little bit cold, like you need an extra layer. You always feel like you need to acquire things, like me going to an estate sale and getting a bunch of kitchen stuff that I don't need. And the main boundary that's breached is the skin. So it's really, Hahnemann called Sora 85% of all disease is all about Sora. So skin disease, allergies, hemorrhoids, asthma, ulcers, jaundice. They're all manifestations of a weakness in the body, not functioning, to its true strength. Um, so, and then the remaining, 15% of diseases came from sexually transmitted diseases. Is it like the polycrest of miasms and everything? What does that mean? You gotta tell me a little bit more. But Sora, I would say, so the chief remedy for Sora, each miasm has a disease associated with it. And the way that Songkran would say it is that basically this kind of survival mechanism in each miasm, this basically, and I haven't fully gotten into this, but a miasm is a way of being that we incorporate into us as a way of survival. And it's almost like a speed or a tempo or a style that a lot of us go through in life in order to survive, right? And so there are some animals out there that are like squirrels, and they're all about like, getting as many like nuts and acquiring as much as possible. And then there's some animals out there that are like, I don't care about acquiring because I'll just go out there and kill my food as soon as I need it and eat it. And that's maybe much more of like a psychotic kind of attitude, not worrying so much about what you have. And then there's the more syphilitic, which is the more hopeless, I'm going to die anyways. So the key, the remedy that Sora is made, is associated with is sorinum, and sorinum is the remedy from scabies. I actually don't give sorinum a ton. I give it, and I give it in cases where the kid's kind of sulfury or hep herself and maybe has like, major some skin issues. I had one true sorinum case where it was a family from Nepal who had moved to New York City, and they were really poor. Their child was autistic. They were super poor, and they literally had bed bugs constantly through pregnancy. And the girl, when I saw her thick skin was super thick and crusted, and she looked really inside herself, and they were like bundling her up all the time, like this picture of this kid in all these clothes. And I gave sorinum, and it was really, really wonderful. I think I put this humbug guy just because he's like always trying to like make money and get stuff for himself. Yeah, so the situation. So basically, Suriname is when you operate in life as if the situation is always difficult and you're worried if you're going to like get through it, but if you work hard enough, you'll get through it. This is also like my father, who's been a construction guy like for his whole life, from like 20 to 70, 9 to 5, like 5 days a week, his whole life. And he's always worrying that he has enough money, and will always like, this is like the great person to hire. Very, very Soric, grew up on a farm, and at the same time, the Sora like limits him, and I've given him some Soric remedies just to get him over the fact that he thinks that he doesn't have enough all the time, and for him to just come into, for me, the healing, like the true healing of Sora and getting back into the Garden of Eden is say that I'm abundance and I can manifest my needs because I'm connected to the earth. I'm connected to, this universe through love, and my needs will always be met. And it's something that I believe that all of us, because we're all Soric on some level, really need to work on our lives, is not worrying about not having enough, not worrying about, our needs being met. At some point you have to, especially most of us are coming from this is a very wealthy country. You know, most people in the world live so much more simply than us. And so it is a delusion that we don't have enough. We're told that we don't have enough on some level to keep us running in the rat race. So, any questions? Zoe, I didn't get your question. We all good? You guys all got me? Okay, all right. All right. There's a remedy for thrifting. Yeah, I get super excited, like deal shopping. I'm so about, I'll even go to like the discount section of my supermarket. And if it's some like fancy like bottle of like, you know, some sort of like sauce and it's for sale, I want to get it because I'm like, oh, I could get it for sale. So, yeah. Some of these other remedies that are very like skin oriented, graphites, petroleum, you know, they're really oriented to like kind of like the skin boundaries when we have kind of like cracks on our skin and these kind of thickened layers and issues of where actually I have like a little cracky like skin blemish here that's a little bit psoriatic. Can we be in more than one miasm at a time? So this is the complication, is that I'm presenting things to you in what will seem like a very understandable way, but absolutely. And in homeopathy speak, homeopaths will be like, oh, this person's psychosyphilitic. Like this person is both psychosis and syphilitic, or psoric syphilitic, or this person's tuberculosis, you know, and it's just a way. And what's really, really interesting is for you to recognize that when I taught the periodic table of elements, and not all of you were in that class last year, on the back of the periodic table of elements, the miasms are listed along the bottom. So acute, typhoid, ringworm, malaria, psychosis, and the miasms are associated with the stages. And so some of us are kind of in a general area, and I want you to recognize that we all have these miasms. It's more like, where are you generally and where are you stuck? You know, and we'll get to that. But like, you know, are you really stuck in this like deficiency place? Are you really stuck in this issue of being depleted? So the psoric remedies in the Book of Life, and I want you to recognize this too on what I have is page 65 of the Book of Life. In the back of the Book of Life, I put in like little charts of different types of kids, but I also kind of like organized the charts a bit according to miasms. So I have like the physically depleted and weak kids are kind of like psoric syphilitic kind of miasms, you know. So if we were to look at the physically depleted and weak remedies, you know, a lot of them are just generally kind of tired and burned out. Sulfur, carboveg, bryonia, natmur. A lot of these are considered kind of psoric kind of remedies. There's also in the Book of Life like the categories of remedies according to their miasm. I don't know what page they're on. And that's according to Sankaran's categorization of remedies by miasm. All right. So psychosis, all right. So you've come out of the Garden of Eden and you're weak and you're cold and then you're creating, then you build a little village and you live like a couple millennia, you know, in this village where people are just trying to, you know, collect enough wood and harvest enough berries and kill enough animals, and time goes by and eventually someone's like, oh, well, I don't want to do the harvesting and I don't want to do this work. If I'm like bright enough and friendly enough and connecting enough, and if enough people like me, people will give me enough stuff that I can survive well. And if I can like do things to impress people, then people will like actually start to give me some of their resources. So so my as a psychotic person, my survival technique is to be gregarious, extroverted, connecting, out there, make people like me. And if there's something that you don't like about me, you're never going to know it. I'm going to hide it. Okay? It's going to get swept under the rug. Like, so that is the psychosis miasm. It's the point where we came to be no longer just caring about, you know, oh, my own, getting my personal needs met, my making sure my resources are met, but it's like being that extra, like, I can get my needs met through not just doing this hard work, but by being special. So the miasm is represented by gonorrhea. So psychosis is, you know, it's the first well-known sexually transmitted stain, you know, and there's something to say, and I think we can be super open about it, about when we're really sexually open. Like a lot of us maybe were at some point in our lives in college or something, we exchange a lot of information that way. And maybe religions that kind of put the kibosh on that, there's a reason for that, right? There's literally a lot of stuff that can come into our bodies from that direction, that can be a challenge and create challenges for our body. In this sense, yeah, gonorrhea is a problem. It's, you know, the sexually transmitted disease and the psychosis miasm, these diseases are seen as kind of going past the skin layer and inside of us. And then these diseases really tend to like affect the joints, like going into that deeper joint lung place. Like it's like, okay, now the skin boundary is no longer a boundary. Now the boundary is our sexual organs and allowing things to come in there, right? And so you know, this is the miasm responsible for warts, growths, and these are diseases that spread from me connecting to you. Sexuality is like, it's a connection, you know, and it's a desire to be open, to connect, to be fluid, to allow things to pass between humans. But it's also can be a problem. We want to limit that to a certain extent, right? All right. So psychotic stress is, I have a disease that I can't get rid of. It just stays with me. This is ultimately herpes. You know, the herpes and all those viral energies, you know, they integrate into the system. They stay with you for life. And then you have these herpes flares, and then you try to kind of put antivirals on them and makeup on them. But it's something that you want to hide so that you can kind of keep going. Not only that, the yeah, like EBV from kissing. Not only that, the energy of that virus itself, it promotes connecting more. So what happens when kids are in this psychotic state is they're licking things, they're maybe like hugging people they shouldn't hug, they're a little bit maybe more out there than they should be. Whenever I detox with nosodes, I get herpes cold sores. Yeah, that could be this psychosis kind of coming through. Sorry, my lighting is really weird. The light bulbs above me went kaput. Yeah, parasites strive to breed, reproduce. How is it that these STDs maintain themselves? They go from person to person. It's information that's getting passed through the human species, right? You know, maybe it's not all bad information. In some ways, I've thought of, hey, you know, Meterinum people, so Meterinum is gonorrhea, the remedy from gonorrhea. They tend to be some of the most creative, outgoing, performing people. Many people that I knew in New York City, many artists, many, you know, it gets us out. The psychosis gets us out of that small cloistered, you know, box of a house, you know, and it gets us to be like, it literally creates variation within our humanity. Create a lot of creativity comes out of these diseases. The diseases gift us something too. So the personalities, I show off to the world that I'm perfect, strong, and capable. I hide my weaknesses. That's a secret. I rely on others liking me to get by in the world. You know, these people, if people don't like them, it really hurts. You know, it hurts them emotionally. Whereas a true Sauric person is so solid in themselves, they really like only care that, you know, good things are kind of going in their small realm of being. And if people don't like them, it doesn't really, it's not such a big deal because their survival doesn't depend on it, right? Think of like all these people that need to get all these like Facebook likes, you know, in order to feel good about themselves. Would this be for interstitial cystitis? Yeah, you know, you could think of, it depends. So is interstitial cystitis a problem of the weakness of the bladder, like the bladder has lost its ability to kind of hold and contain, and it's just everything's weak because you've had, you know, maybe some babies or some too much pelvic organ stuff? Or so that would be Sauric. Or is the interstitial cystitis because you've literally had like, you know, STDs roaming around in that area, creating lots of irritation? So that would be interstitial cystitis. Creativity because you're open and exchanging energy. One, yeah, two. And, you know, creativity, they say, is really all very much about our generative organs, our sexual organs. And there's something to say about the psychotic person kind of living from that part of their body. You know, they're living to create things, but they're also living to be sexually attractive, and to, you know, they may not actually reproduce children in their lifetime, but they may produce tons of artwork or music, right? And like a lot of these, just think of like how many of the musicians and artists are famous out there were like, had like nonstop different sexual partners, right? So, or actors, yeah. It's just like, you know, that like New York City and LA, it's just like sex central. I thought you could get gonorrhea just putting your hands on the subway pole in New York City. I swear, I can't believe how much Mederinum I gave living in New York City. It is so much, like the dating scene there, and like, and it is really very much about, so talking about, so there's like, oh, you know, some well-known psychotic remedies, but really the two most well-known ones are Thuya and Mederinum. Thuya is, we've talked about that, it's the conifer, and it's the remedy for vaccination. So vaccinations, the skin boundary is already being breached, okay, and it's going into like the deeper organ levels and maybe the joints and the lungs, and so it's definitely psychosis. And then is it going even deeper? It will go as deep as your body will allow it to, based on your miasmatic predisposition. So if your miasmatic predisposition has a syphilitic taint, you know, there could be a deeper destruction of the nervous system. You know, it's not so cut and dry like that. But so Thuya is like, how can you kind of push that energy out, like clear out, you know, what has been impressed into you or pushed into you. And the Thuya person cares a lot about how they're perceived. You know, they care about how they look. They care about their makeup. They care about, you know, it's even talked about that they have this kind of like almost like waxy appearance to their face, like there is like makeup face. And a lot of actors are super Thuya-y, you know, where they have this way of being on the outside and it has no match to who they truly are on the inside. Mederinum is like the remedy of the total sensorial, you know, living according to, you know, what my body and what that like feels good, and And I'm going to live it up. And the true Metarinum person, they actually have the strength to maintain that. They have like a kind of like an earthy sensoriness to, there's like people out there that are super strong and they're in their bodies and they can just like do crazy stuff and not, they're okay. They can like, you know, go to like 10 Burning Mans in a row, travel around the world 15 times, drink all sorts of crazy drinks, and then like they seem fine to you. But what happens with Thuya and Metarinum is that all of a sudden, like with a Metarinum person, they hit 50, heart attack, boom. It's like everything catches up with them. You know, it's like, think of all of those like artists that die at 27, you know, it's like Kurt Cobain and all these guys, you know, they live super hard and all of a sudden life is just done. Um, so there's a true burning out that can happen. We only get so much juju. And they don't get the soric piece, like the true, what you need to learn when you heal the psychotic miasm is to learn that you have limitations and there's a time you have to say no. End it. Stop partying. Metarinum, Thuya, and arsenicum are related according to Nature's Materia Medica. Metarinum is the acute and Thuya is the chronic. Interesting. Yeah, and so giving Metarinum, I gave Metarinum to this one guy. He was what was it? What is it called when you're like the main basketball player, the point guard of a professional basketball team? And he had been playing, he was super good at what he did. And but he had had asthma and pneumonia ever since he was a little kid. And he was just like coughing up all this gunk all the time and trying to play being the point guard of a professional basketball team. And I gave him Metarinum and it totally cured all of the physical illness. And then all of a sudden he just got tired. He was like exhausted. And I was just like, that's where your body needs to be, because you spent all your teenage and 20 years burning up all your resources and now there's nothing. Like it wasn't a remedy, was not gonna fix it. He needed supplements, herbs, things to build him up, yin, you know. And so yeah, you know, that was one guy I've given Metarinum to. You know, I've given Metarinum can be really great for Metarinum, sulfur, belladonna. They're all like the big outgoing kind of heaty remedies. So they're nice to think about for the really robust plethoric people. But Metarinum is so interesting too because it can really it can truly be very, very sensitive because they're so sensorial. They can have this side to them that can seem almost introverted and sensitive and kind of like bipolar on one sense, where they're picking up on who you are and all of this stuff. And then on the other sense, they can be like super wild and hard and mean, you know, like this cruel side can come out of them because they've just gotten like kind of a tough and hardened edge to them from living too much life, if that makes any sense. So Metarinum, I've seen Metarinum husbands marry these kind of Staphysagria wives. So it's like super outgoing sexual guy who just marries a wife who's like kind of more docile and doesn't speak up much, or she gets kind of suppressed by his intensity. And I've seen kids who are kind of Metarinum-y kids with a mom that doesn't speak up enough, and the mom's just super overwhelmed by her hyper overpowering husband and kids. What else have I seen? A lot of Metarinum. Yeah, I've also seen Metarinum kind of like surprisingly, I gave Metarinum to a girl who needed apis and then sulfur, but her family was so like middle of the road soric. Like they just seemed so like kind of health, like not out there. They were like really kind of introverted, quiet people, but they had this daughter who was just really outgoing and like heady. And I was giving her remedies like Apis and Belladonna and they worked. Then finally she was just started having a lot of like temper tantrums and I gave her Metarinum and like, oh, it totally took the edge off. Um, you know that baby voice, that's so interesting. Wait, why are you guys talking about the baby voice? Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, the baby voice, definitely. You know, there's something to say about Metarinum and Thuya and these psychotic kids where there's the psychotic and a group of them, the psychotic and the carcinosin and the maybe the tuberculinic kids, they can seem really precocious where they really like can be really advanced for their age, but then they can do age regressions too. You know, and so I think it's really when you have both this kind of combination of precocity and then age regressions, I think that's really interesting. And you have there's this part of them that wants to live that out. So yeah, I have to really feel into the baby voice thing. Yeah. If it's in a hallucinating voice, like you're hearing voices, that's a different thing. That feels like infection, or that feels like maybe syphilinum or some sort of split. So Thuya has this idea of split. There's these symptoms that come with Thuya, like they say like split urine. So you're literally peeing in the bowl and the urine splits into two streams, or the nails split. And the idea is this idea of an inner split too. It's this Thuya also has this idea of like I'm fragile on the inside, but I try to be tough on the outside. I don't show off my weakness. I act tough because I don't want people to see me as weak and vulnerable. So vulnerability is a big thing for the Thuya and the Metarinum and the psychotic people. Let's see, anything else? Um, we'll get to more of it. All right. So the perception of the psychotic miasm is someone who has to accept his situation and live with it because there's a fixed, irremediable weakness and that it is incapable of changing, and he's stuck with the situation for life, right? And you have to cope with it by covering it up with egotism, compulsive acts, or secrecy. You know, the psychotic people may really like to cheat. Oh, too. You know, I'm not happy with my marriage, but I'm not going to tell anybody that. And so I'll just secretly, you know, do things like maybe cheating or lying or stealing or doing things that, you know, I don't want to seem like I'm bad, but I have to do these things because, you know, I'm so hypersexual. I just can't contain myself. So, so there's that possibility too. Typical pathology, asthma, neuroses, warts, benign growths. Okay. You know, it's so funny. Arsenicum, I have seen listed as syphilitic, tuberculinic. Arsenicum is just like one of those polycrests you could put into, like, you could come up with a reason why it fit every miasm. And then as far as like, you know, the charts of kids who are like really psychotic, the precocious and extroverted chart of kids are the really like true, like kind of psychotic types of kids, or the quirky kids. You know, remedies like black caninum, you know, have this outgoing quirkiness, but I'm not going to hide the part of myself that feels bad about myself. I'm going to hide that. Feels like disgusting about myself. I literally could teach this whole course just based on teaching you the miasms and the remedies that fall into it. All right, so, you know, I put a picture of a guy at the top of the mountain, or a guy kind of trying to cover up himself. And psychosis is literally the middle of the periodic table of elements. It correlates with stage 10. Okay, so syphilitic, the last one we're going to kind of talk about today, is the miasm represented by syphilis. You know, syphilis, they say, is like kind of gone away, but it's kind of coming back. And it's also a sexually transmitted disease, and it's a more destructive one than gonorrhea. It's more destructive than chlamydia. By the way, I have friends who, who seem super psychotic and super thuya-y and didn't muscle test for gonorrhea, but muscle tested for the remedy chlamydia. So if that's something that you're clearing, clearing through the sexually transmitted diseases that we've had is definitely helpful. And it has an impact on our urinary and reproductive organs. Those remedies can have, really a lot of painful periods. Meterinum, there was a period when I needed Meterinum, and that was when I had the most painful periods of my life, like writhing on the floor, like miserable, like the pain was so horrible in down in that area. So and it's true, STDs can make you lose your fertility, so there's something truly destructive happening there. And then healing it with antibiotics is, who knows what we're really doing there. You can kind of see that in some communities that are very sexually open, that get STDs and heal a lot of antibiotics. These communities of people are very artistic and very creative, and they're, I'm just thinking of like, the typical gay community in a lot of cities, and they're also top of their game. They make a lot of money, and they can earn, do really well in their jobs, and that's a very psychotic picture. Yeah, and interestingly embodying kind of both the male and the female energies too. So, yeah. So we want to be kind of psychotic. We want to be top of our game. We want to be creative. We want to be producing things, but we don't want to be hiding things under the rug. We don't want things to kind of catch up with us when we're 50, having destroyed, half of our insides. And so that's where homeopathy comes in. When you can clear things homeopathically, you can have the freedom to be wherever you want to be, Mayas, on this range. You don't have to be really, you can just, manifest what you really want to create in your life. So the third one I'm going to teach you today is the syphilitic miasm, which we just said. So syphilis basically can create blindness, insanity, suicide, depression. I think I had talked a little bit about it last week when we were talking about, like, or the week before, Lyme's disease and all of the various, Tolstoy and Hitler, or the various people that were syphilitic. Heart conditions, like deep core organ conditions. And the feeling with a syphilitic person is that this disease is killing me. I'm being destroyed. And it's happening no matter what. It's like I'm hopeless. Like it's not, I don't think I can be fixed. So things just kind of have to go, and I start to not care as much. You start to get suicidal impulses. You start to get depressed. You start to lay there. And you start to kind of like involute on yourself. You don't care as much anymore. You stay inside. There's an interesting association with the fact that this containing of oneself, this disease is going to kill you. And when you get disease that's going to kill you, you don't care, and you stay in your house. But what does that also do when you stay in your house contained? It protects you in a way because you don't want to, but it also protects others. There's also this energy of like, exposure to these people could put other people into danger. So it's like humanity, we like naturally kind of isolate ourselves when we're feeling weak and we need to restore ourselves, or when we're going to die or things are really at the end of the rope, right? You don't feel like being social when you feel this way. You separate, you become compulsive because you feel like germs are coming at you all the time. You become really ritualistic out of those fears. A lot of cases in this class, started, at least maybe are still in this place of syphilitic. And if you know that, realize that it's hard to heal the layers that have taken you to this point. But what I feel like is the most important thing to really understand if you are in this syphilitic place is that there are these things that want to kill you or these things that need to die, but there are truly things that need to be let go of. We are in this constant flow in our bodies of creation and destruction. The process of creation and destruction is happening on a cellular level in our bodies all the time, every day. And there are things that we need to let go of, that need to die, that need to be cut off. And if you're in this syphilitic place, what are those things that you need to cut off and you need to let die so that you can live? Okay, like the house, the relationship, the husband, the mole, like whatever it is that's killing you from the inside out, see it and say, this is over. And so it's like either that bug or that thing needs to die so that you can live, or you're going to go down with the ship. And so yes, Lyme disease is associated with syphilis because Lyme disease can go to the brain. It can go right to our nervous system. It goes right to the core. The syphilitic miasm, which is associated with syphilis, is associated with diseases that destroy all the way to the nervous system level. Okay? It's just like there's a wide range: alcoholism, depression, insanity, loss of your senses, psychological disorders, ulcerations, bone pain, these kind of like destructive things. The delusion of a syphilitic person is that they are faced with a situation that is beyond salvage, far beyond capacity, leading to complete hopelessness and despair. There's no way out of this situation. And the responsibility rests, really, where the highest and sole responsibility rests entirely on one person's shoulders. That's interesting. I definitely feel like syphilitic people have the tendency also to just kind of like blame and let it go, and just like, it's over now. It was all based on this. But there can be a negativity or a pessimistic view of life, a chronic deep pessimism, reactions of complete despair or giving up or violence to self or others. Yeah. So the heavy metals are associated with being syphilitic. Syphilinum is syphilitic. And remedies like, that are really kind of deeply destructive, I would say other than that would be other nosodes like Bartonella or the Lyme's nosode. So this is the norm, which is it has been, or it still is for a lot of you in class. And I know this, it's true, because for some reason in this class of like 30, 40 people, 50 people, there's some major syphilitic cases that kind of came in here. And there's a part of you that is looking for a solution and a way out. And a lot of the solution comes from homeopathy, but it really comes into being centered in your heart and coming back to love. Because the brain, when it's in this syphilitic place and it's the looping of the destructive patterns through the brain that keeps you in destructive mode. It keeps you wanting to kind of self-sabotage or lay in bed for all day long. And so, coming into the heart, I really feel the need right now, because of this energy that is present, is just to take a deep breath in and out. And if this feels really true to you, take a deep breath in and out and come into your heart. And feel the love in your heart for all of the things that you do care about, and feel the love for the people that do care about you. And when you feel that love, affirm and say, I choose my willpower. I choose to live. Every morning I wake up, I choose to live for myself, for this life, because life is a gift, and I'm grateful for the love and the good things in my life. And aligning with love in your heart and coming hopefully to that part of your brain that is aligned with higher truth, and walking in that alignment and getting out of the pessimism and the negativity is a really important skill. Not only homeopathy, but meditation, any surrender can help bring you there. So realizing that, either you go down or you choose to live. And there may be parts of you that need to die. There are things that need to come to an end. There are things that need to be like, done. I'm done with this disease. I'm done with being a victim. I'm done with this husband. I'm done with this job, So, yeah. And absolutely, for the right cases, amazing for OCD, amazing for ritualistic behavior, amazing for those like limes and pandas cases where the kids are, having like truly destructive thoughts. Amazing for family histories of alcoholism. Acyphylinum was a miracle remedy for my son's severe OCD. Change only started when we started changing our energy. There were times when yeah. You could go even further with that meditation. Yeah. And that idea of like hitting the mark, hitting the mark, meaning like we're being really true to making decisions in our life that are aligned with love and our higher self in this alignment, that aren't carrying us in this loop of, I need to be something that I'm not, which is psychotic. I don't have enough, which is soric. Or I'm so, life sucks, I'm negative, I'm a victim, which is syphilitic. And these are stories that our brain plays to each other. And clearing that miasm is clearing the thoughts and clearing the physical body, which is all interlinked in homeopathy, not separated. So we can have more freedom to come within an internal place that allows us to really play with life and create life, and be in like driving our own ship in whatever direction we want to. Okay. So really just take a deep breath in and out, and really clearing. With the syphilinum and that destructiveness, sometimes we're really clearing out reptilian fears. This reptilian energy of destruction, of blood and violence and, negativity and so really letting that go too. All right. And there are some syphilitic kind of charts in the Book of Life. The heavy, serious, dark kids would be considered syphilitic. The extremely negative kids could be considered syphilitic. Self-harm is, it's generally pretty syphilitic. And we'll let's kind of go through. I want to do a little comparison of some of these. So we all have these miasms. We all have these syphilitic pieces that want to kill and destroy either something within us or something within our life. And it serves a purpose still. There's a time for destruction. There's a time for ending. There's a time for clearing things out. There's recognize what those things are and get it done. Don't it's like sitting in your house with things deteriorating and not doing something about it. When you heal, you can see that, and then you do something about it, So we all have the syphilitic piece. We all have, oh my gosh, You know, there's a story of this woman I know of who went to a Nazi concentration camp. And she went into the bunkers where they kept the children. And in the bunkers where they kept the children in the concentration camps, the children drew butterflies, which is so beautiful because the butterflies in homeopathy represent children, lost and abandoned children. And they also represent like this flight of the soul, you know, and this creativity. So the children carved butterflies into their bunkers in the concentration camps. And the woman who saw this, she's like, how is this possible? Like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And the woman who was guiding her on the tour said, I was one of those children. That was me. And the woman was like, how can you be here every day walking people through a concentration camp that was so destructive and so awful? And the woman, she said, there's a powerful thing that this taught me, that going through this taught me, and that's that every one of us has a Hitler inside of us. We all do. We all have this destructive capacity. And that's that, like, recognizing, like, hey, I'm not so holier than thou and you're such a bad person. We all have the capacity for absolute destruction and absolute killer instincts um and negativity and victim and blame. And it's a matter of, like, do we have the power to recognize these things? We all have the psychotic to a certain extent, and we all have the soric to a certain extent. Where are we stuck? Where are you stuck? You know, and I'm teaching you 3 of the miasms, but there's like, let's see, how many does Sankaran list? 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 or 10 possible miasms too. You know, so this is like the miasm of deficiency, which is soric, the miasm of kind of excess, putting oneself out there, which is psychotic, and then the miasm of destruction. And they're all phases of beingness, building, being, and destroying. And so we can all, there's no judgment. If you're feeling super syphilitic, don't judge it. It's just a phase. You know, it's not wrong. It's just something that, you know, it's what's wrong is not allowing what needs to die. You know, and what might be wrong is that if you want to live, then live. So the polycrest remedies, sulfur, arsenicum, natmur, you could explain all of them according to soric, psychotic, and syphilitic. They have all of those elements because they kind of have that whole cycle associated with them. The Sankaran I'm going to get to next week. So yeah, these physiologic pieces, you know, ideally with homeopathy, we get you to the point where you've really healed a lot of the destructive parts of what's happened to your bodies and your families. We get you to the point where you don't feel like you have to prove yourself through psychosis. You don't need to be something that you're not. You don't need to be, like, you know, on your cell phone half the day. And so healing the psychosis and then healing the soric, you don't have to have all you think that you need to have. That we are always abundant. We're living on an abundant planet in an abundant time, right? So so we can be ourselves and release ourselves of the chain of these miasms. So prescribing, how to prescribe on these miasms. So there's some homeopaths out there that prescribe miasmatically in the super dogmatic way, like, okay, we're just going to clear through and give you all the well-known miasmatic remedies. We're going to give you Meteorinum, Thuya, Serinum, Civilinum, and it just totally doesn't fit for me. But I think that's a weird. I've heard people who've done that, clearing the miasms according, and it just doesn't make sense to me. What it does is it helps point you. I think it is a little bit dangerous. What it helps you do is point you in the direction of remedies. So if you're feeling, wow, I really feel like I'm in a syphilitic place, you can look at the generally syphilitic remedies. If you know you've done well with a group of syphilitic one syphilitic remedy. You can look at maybe some other syphilitic remedies. So it points you in the direction of some remedies. It also helps you understand kind of maybe where you are in the journey of healing. Um, and yeah, you know, you can always, you know, the idea is if something isn't working, to go to treating that miasmatic layer. So I'm just gonna like do this kind of comparison chart of sora, psychosis, and syphilitic for you guys so that you can kind of like see, and then you're gonna start to like look through the world. You'll watch a movie and be like, this movie is so syphilitic. So for example, Ryan, he was really into watching these like super violent martial arts movies where like blood is flying everywhere, there's lots of swords and stuff. I gave him Mercurius and he stopped watching those, right? It was like that syphilitic part of him needed to like go. And he's finally watching romance movies with me. Like, oh my God, he never wanted to watch romance movies, but now we watch 4 nights, 5 nights, you know, we watch a whole bunch of romance movies, which is super sulfury, my sulfury. So, yeah, some of those like really violent, really dark TV shows, you know. So this is according to Paul Herskew's kind of organization of things. So don't let this be too black and white in the way that you see things. But a Soric person wants to wear LL Bean, average clothes, the Gap, be neat, be clean, you know, not stand out. They've got their like daytimer, they're organized, you know, they're contained. They want to be like appropriate and have good manners. Average psychotic person is like giggling and laughing and giving you great eye contact and making you look at them and drawing you in, and they're magnetic and they're into their makeup and jewelry and bright colors, and they know they're going to be liked because they've always been liked and they live off of being liked, right? And then the syphilitic person will be, you know, they might dress exactly the way the Soric person dresses, but all of a sudden there will be this like, I don't care. You know, there might be this part of them that's just like stopped combing their hair. You know, it could be that there's this, you know, the goth people who pierce through their skin or like hang from their piercings and stuff like that, just to be like kind of like, I don't know what that's about, but feels pretty syphilitic too. So the relationship kind of person, if someone's Soric, they stay with the person because that person is making money for them. In a certain way. No, but it's like they're for survival, right? Or they have a simple relationship, doesn't require too much from the relationship, or it's just according to like the basic rules of relationship where I cook for you and you make money for me, you know. But it could be there's something better out there, but I can, you know, just watch a romance movie and get over it. Whereas the psychotic person wants dancing, travel, nightlife, and all of a sudden we're soulmates. We're so meant to be together. Like there's never been anyone better. You like make me explode and my world will never be the same as the psychotic romantic person. And then they meet someone like that like 5 years later and they cheat on them and then they have another wife. Are you guys getting the energy of this? It's pretty, you get it, right? You get the archetypes that I'm describing. And the psychosis is like kind of being cut off. Maybe there's sex and not feeling, or maybe there's like, you know, a perversion that's happening there. There's not like a total like release of one's emotions into the relationship because of the cutoffness. And there's a kind of like, there could be like a negative kind of, it's hard to say selfish, but like not really able to like, you know, because they're being destroyed from the inside out and feel hopeless, there isn't much to give of oneself, you know. There isn't, you can only really be generous and give of oneself if you have like self-love and you have like abundance from within, is the way I feel. So we'll skip the car. You guys can read that. Drinking is kind of funny. Like the Soric person will have one drink because they don't want to look boring. And because drinks are too expensive, I would never spend $12 on a drink. You know, plus I have to be the designated driver and I don't want to get into an accident. You know, that's like truly. Whereas the like, you know, like drinking for the psychotic person is like, oh my God, we get to take our clothes off when we drink. We get to laugh really loud. We get to connect more. I get to like kiss that person maybe when I'm drunk. It's all about connecting. So drinking kind of helps with that, you know, and, you know, what is it that people do in cities to, you know, to show off and go out and nightlife? You drink, you know, whereas a truly like syphilitic thing to do is to drink at home alone. Right. And we know that that's kind of a little bit of a cornerstone of maybe being alcoholic is, and it's not good. It's not healthy, you know, to be in that place. So the feelings and the sensations of the Soric person is feeling like, I feel achy because I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough supplements in my body. I didn't eat enough. Whereas the pain from the psychotic person is like that big, throbbing, painful, like I'm going to scream. People are going to hear me, you know, energy. And then the pain of a syphilitic person happens at night when nobody's around, you know, and it's deep in the bones and you're alone. I've also seen these, like, this happens with birth. You know, like with birth, there are people who have births that are really syphilitic. And the birth is like, nobody was there for me. Things happened to me that I didn't want to have happen. I was cut in a way I didn't want to be cut, you know. It was dark. And it's truly, whereas a birth that is like really a much more psychotic is like, I'm going to film this so everybody gets to see it, you know, and put my makeup on so that I have good birth pictures. And then the Soric person is just like, I'm going to work through this on my own. Maybe I'll do a home labor. Maybe I don't have enough energy. I'll go to the hospital. It's kind of maybe like an average, right? Skin stuff, like the average kind of crusty skin stuff is Soric. This huge infecting yellow green, when you see like pussy extra discharges, genital discharges, you can think about psychosis. When things get ulcerated and scarred and never go away, that's kind of more syphilitic, right? Cancerous, like a Soric person with cancer will have like a hard, lumpy thing that kind of just doesn't do much and it doesn't do much harm to them. A psychotic person with cancer, it'll like grow pretty big, or you'll have this kind of like huge mole on the face. And then like a syphilitic cancer is like, it's like breaking open and you're seeing all of the tissues and the bones and it's killing the person, right? PMS, you know, the Soric PMS is I'm weak, I'm hungry, I'm anxious, like I just want to clean and organize before my period. The psychotic person just gets angry, like they have this like huge anger and they just want to be like, bah, 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 bah. You know, like don't, you know, like don't mess with me, kind of like big feelings and emotions. And then the PMS of the syphilitic person is depressed and isolated and alone feeling. So those are the 3 miasms and the teaching that I'm gonna do on them. But I would like to like hear what you guys feel about that. If you guys feel like you know, I can't stand I'm this psychotic person. So it's like no judgment, right? Like like all of them have their benefits and all of them have their bad parts. In the end, if you're stuck in syphilis, you're going to die a lot sooner. If you're stuck in psychosis, you're going to die sooner. If you're stuck in Soric, you might likely have a little bit more of a prolonged life because that's your modus operandi. But you might not have as fun of a life as a psychotic person. Yeah, so it's like they all have their bits and pieces to it. You know, the syphilitic person can't maybe says I don't give a fuck, you know, and maybe that's something that the psychotic person needs to learn. So We all have those elements. Do any of you guys feel like, whoa, I don't know, I'm confused, like, or where do I stand with this? Or my kids, or how does this apply to my kids who seem like, what is autism when it comes to these three miasms? Generally, I would say, like, autism for the most part is this shutting down and closing off. It's syphilitic miasm, right? It's an isolation on some level. What is pandas and pans? On some level, it's a lot of psychosis leading to, like, we've been in psychosis mode, which is like, I'm doing, going, like trying to be perfect, trying to get that egg, trying to da da da. And then you're shoving too many things under the rug and it all collects too much under the rug, and then all of a sudden you start to slide downhill towards syphilitic. So pans can be anywhere between psychotic and syphilitic. What we want to do is bring our kids to that kind of more soric place where they can also kind of be themselves and put themselves out there and be creative. So my oldest son has a lot of skin stuff, but his mind is better. Is he moving back to soric? Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And so things are moving back out to the skin level. In a lot of cases, you'll see that. You'll see like the body trying to push things out at that skin level. And when you've like, the general trajectory for a lot of cases that I treat, which are special needs, is working on the immune system and how the body actually responds to the destructive. When we have these tendencies, these delusional tendencies that we need to survive by being a certain way, we draw the infections that fit that purpose for us, right? And so in a general case, I'm healing the immune system to not have to feel like it's constantly managing all these infections. So it's usually doing a lot of nosodes at the beginning, and then we have to kind of clear some of the toxicity with maybe some like some clears, vaccine clears and stuff like that. If there's a lot of pain and physical sensorial issues that are like pain driven, then there will be a lot of plant remedies to heal the pain. And eventually that child will move towards a much more soric place. In the family, if the family is all about kind of a lot of like, I need to prove myself, I need to be out there, I need to be like super famous, and they have a lot of like of that, the kid will feel that energy too, which is kind of psychotic too. I'm thinking my son was born soric and had a lot of skin issues and was pushed into syphilitic with vaccines and the steroids. One, absolutely. So you could be born soric with the weaknesses. You'd be this calc carb kid who's born with like just a weak immune system, a little bit slower, and then you get lots of ear infections because you're kind of this calc carb kid with the slow immune system, treated with antibiotics, starting to mess up the gut. It's the ear infections and the rashes that kids get, that's soric. What do we do to these soric things? Do we support the body with its strength with natural medicine so that it can deal with it? No, we we make them have more things to deal with, like drugs and just kind of pushing that disease deeper in with steroids. And so then the disease goes into this kind of more deeper tissue level, the lungs, and then you add a couple more, a bunch of, 50 injections of heavy metals into that, straight to the syphilitic place. The heavy metals are super, mercury, I would say aluminum is a really kind of syphilitic kind of energy of like brain fog and, nerve destruction. So, I felt a huge awakening with the syphilitic miasm for my PANS kids. Huge anxiety, depression, looping in the brain, fight or flight, alcoholic grandparents and great-grandparents. Right. And so a lot of these kids, it's like, yeah, we have like the toxicity and the vaccines, but it's potentiating maybe something that was there. Like you already had a lot of toxicity you know, or there was already some genetic predispositions in the family that just kind of pushed you over the edge. Some genetic issues, which are really, you know, destructive in nature, there's something syphilitic happening. I was thinking that my husband is currently syphilitic and I see Orem is under that. I gave him Orem today. Yeah, totally. Actually, I know your husband. There's a total heavy metals component there, maybe mercurius too. So yeah, you know, it's a challenge because um, a lot of what we perceive culturally as cool and healthy, such as being like a great musician who's out there or making tons of money or being, you know, this like super popular celebrity, is actually deeply destructive to our health. What we should really like be like honoring is the super healthy, you know, farmer in some healthy place who just lives simply and never has any media attention on how simple they live, right? Because that what they're doing is embodying a healthy way of living that actually, you know, brings some freedom. At the same time, farmers are super storic. So can you take away the genetic predisposition for alcoholism if you treat the syphilitic miasm? That's the goal. You know, syphilinum is a remedy that really can help treat the alcoholism. I also love to give alcoholics, you know, for clearing out the alcohol predisposition. Alcoholism, I know probably at least 10 of you in this class, at least 10 of you in this class have a very strong syphilitic miasm. At least 10 of you in this class have very strong alcoholism. At least 10 of you in this class have some major like nerve, you know, deep family psychological disorders. And so why are we here is to help heal that for our kids so they don't go deeper into that, so that they can have healthy kids, you know, or that they don't have to live with, you know, with energies that kind of depress them or take them down. Again, some of that is their choice, but anything else? All right. So that was a lot. There was a lot there. And I want it to kind of filter through this week and to take time with it. And you can either like go whole hog with studying miasms, or it doesn't have to be a part of the way that you practice homeopathy at all. For people who have the syphilitic piece going on, it really helps to incorporate some sort of spiritual practice like guided meditations. Alcoholics Anonymous is an organization that helps the syphilitic piece and the self-destructive element of alcoholism, and it does it through surrender, right? It does it through kind of a spiritual practice. So homeopathy helps with syphilitic, but the spiritual practice helps a lot. The psychotic people can be really spiritual. Psychotic people like have a way, they can actually be like really spiritually open and connecting to God and having these blissful moments. And they'll be at a, you know, at a music festival and they'll have a moment of spiritual bliss and awakening and oneness. And they can be some of the most like preachers, like Thuya is the preacher remedy, like that guy up there, and they're bringing down the light and everything, but they don't want to sometimes see their darkness. They don't want to see what they're sweeping under the rug. And what I'm saying for the psychotic person is that don't spiritually bypass all the junk either. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then the Sorg person probably goes to a really traditional church and maybe doesn't get much out of it. But does it anyways because they're supposed to. So, all right. So let's just close our eyes. Just take a deep breath in and out. And just feeling all of the variety in our humanity and the way that we live and the way of who we are. And that these are just survival mechanisms. These are just variations, variations in our life. And that we don't judge them, we accept them for what they are. And just seeing them for what they are, feeling the love of who we are underneath it all. Underneath the miasms, underneath the patterns and the remedy states and the infections. Feeling the part of us that observes, learns, watches. The part of us that is unchanging. And tapping into that unchanging vibration in us that feels and experiences life, that loves life, that wants a good life, that wants a soulful life, that wants to learn about life. And learning and really having passion for learning and experiencing goodness, experiencing love, experiencing healthy relationships, loving ourselves. And just taking a deep breath in and out. And just shedding that chain of miasms. It's both cultural and inherited and learned. And knowing that from that place in our hearts, we have the power to choose where we want to be in life for ourselves and for our kids. With love, with creativity, with full alignment in connection with the world and within connection within ourselves. So just taking a deep breath in and out. When you open your eyes, I'm going to stop the recording.